We wrote this book because we're passionate about leadership, and we've seen what works and what doesn't work. We learned some hard lessons, and we realized as we trained leaders in the SEAL teams to help the future generations of leaders as they came up through the ranks and prepared them for their combat experiences, we saw those guys go out with the same leadership principles we taught them and do some extraordinary stuff. And so then as we help leaders in the business world, we saw leaders do some amazing things, and these same principles allowed them to succeed and really dominate on their battlefields. And so people started pressuring us and asking us that, hey, can you capture these lessons learned, something that we can actually reference when you're not here to give us a brief. And that's really why we wrote this book, to help leaders everywhere.
You know, people will say, obviously it's different, you know, what you did in combat and what we're doing in the business world. And while clearly there are differences, there's a lot more similarities than there are differences. You've got, you know, in a leadership position, you've got the task of leading a diverse group of people to achieve some kind of a goal, some kind of a mission, and you want to do it in the most effective and most efficient way.
I think what's different about this book from other leadership books that I've seen out there, number one is just practical experience. And you know, this is not theory learned in a classroom. This is experience-based school of hard knocks, where we learn this about what works and what doesn't.
The principles that are in this book are the principles that allowed us to be successful in an extremely challenging environment. And therefore, we've seen that these principles are effective in any environment.
There's nothing more humbling than tough combat experiences where you know, you don't bring all your guys home, you know, from combat, or where the enemy does some things that you hadn't expected and gets the best of you, you know, on a particular day. And so those things are incredibly humbling. And so you got to stay humble. You got to learn those lessons, go back to the drawing board, figure out how you can do things better. And I think that's really what this book is about: is teaching that, in that spirit of humility, for leaders to use extreme ownership, to look in the mirror and realize there's nobody else to blame, that they've got to own everything in their world and take charge of everything that affects their mission.
This book isn't all about, hey, we did awesome and look at all the great stuff we did. There's a lot of stuff in this book that was actually hard to write about, because you're writing about some mistakes that we made as leaders, some mistakes that our subordinates made that we were responsible for. And when you see that, when you've done that, when you've experienced that, it really gives you the inspiration to help other people that are facing those same kind of tough, challenging decisions from a leadership perspective. And so it's definitely tough to write about. Even reading through it, when I was reading through the edits, you know, you're going through it saying, wow, that was a hard time in my life, and here it is, poured out to the world. That's a challenge. Interestingly, in the SEAL teams, there was no real doctrine about leadership. And so we kind of learned on the job, and over a 20-year career, you know, I was trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. And it's great now to have taken those lessons that we learned over our careers and through intense combat to say, hey, this distilled group of laws and this distilled group of principles is what helped us, and I can give it to you in a very concise. You don't have to do 20 years in the SEAL teams. You can pick up this book, you can read it, and you can see not only how they applied to us in combat, but also how they applied with other businesses, and again, in a wide variety of industries. And I'll tell you, it's a manual about leadership, but there's not step-by-step directions, because leadership is not that cookie cutter. And if it was that easy, there wouldn't be books about leadership. There'd be one book, and you know, it would have 10 steps, and this is how you can become a great leader. Leadership is a lot more nuanced than that. You've got human elements, you've got market factors, you've got what the enemy's gonna do, you've got all these different things that affect leadership. And so it's not a simple 1 + 1 = 2. There's a lot more algebra, and there's a lot more dynamics, geometry, and personalities, and human interaction that comes into it. And that's what makes leadership challenging. The principles outlined in the book, they're not ultra complex. They're fairly simple and straightforward. And yet it's amazing that even as a SEAL leader, I wasn't taught these principles in a concise manner. I kind of had to figure them out and take bits and pieces through a 20-year career to figure it out. And now we've kind of captured them and distilled them down into some pretty straightforward concepts that if you understand, you can apply them in any situation.